How's it going, everyone? Oh my god, what is this? Woo! Uh, that's right. How's it going, everyone? Welcome to another video, but in today's video, we're gonna talk about is the advanced Redux. So, why is this? You might wonder. Well, because after dedicate time to over the couple 8-9 months to understand how JavaScript works, and then what is the value proposition of React, how React works, and then the natural step was to look at how can we now write React applications with TypeScript and in a performant way. What are the techniques that allows to do that? So the next evolutionary step is how can we now is understand or create is the UI development for enterprise, which is one of them, as well as understanding is the front-end system design in the advanced Redux, which is what we're going to do today. So the goal of Redux specifically here is to understand how the things works, right? And what are the techniques and tools that we're gonna learn that we're going to apply that to our job or for a client where we need to actually provide these services. So, in addition to being one of the most battle test state management libraries out there, Redux has a whole bunch of new features that come out of the past few years in plural. Yeah. So you're gonna learn not only how to use Redux with TypeScript, something that I'm quite familiar with, React with TypeScript, but now we're gonna see now how to do that with Redux. So Redux with TypeScript, Redux Toolkit, that's right. Test Redux Reducer, and if you're familiar with this concept from React, which is Reducer, right? You are pretty much now what you need to actually understand this advanced Redux, right? And then RTK query with async thumbs for async network calls in React Redux app. So here, what we're gonna see in today's or in this course is how how one of the most battle test state management libraries works with TypeScript, and now with Toolkit, or this set of tools that now is wrapped up as a way to make these things much less verbose and more straightforward. That's when we have the Redux Toolkit. How can we now test our reducers, as well as the RTK query for managing is the state updates or for perform this async network using async thumbs calls in your React and Redux apps. And there is also a reason why the emerge of things like Saga, or as a way to know in a particularly set of transactions. Once all of that is done, once that Saga is done, now you can actually proceed to do what you need with the data. Something interesting, totally, completely, and understandable as well. So, no, this is not the specific goal. In fact, the specific goal is this, right? Because here, okay, learn is that learn how to apply, how to use one of the most battle tests. Yeah, learn how to use one of the most. Yeah, learn how to use one of the most battle test state management libraries out there. That's all. That's the entire goal of this. So because of that, this is not the structure itself. It's in fact the structure here is the introduction, the Redux toolkit. Okay, introduction, the Redux toolkit. Wait, what? The Redux toolkit, followed by type hooks. Okay, and asynchronous requests, type hooks, as well as asynchronous requests, and that'll be all. Really? Really? That'll be all. What? Okay. Really? What? I thought there would be more than that. Anyway. Yeah. I don't. What? For real? So Redux toolkit, type hooks, and asynchronous request. What? Well, actually, this is a very short course, by the way, as a way to understand that. So yeah, let's get into this. Well, this is actually how this course is organized, right? So this is how the exercise are exercise in plural, how the exercise are organized, right, like this. So good. So this is how exercise are organized, like this. You get Redux, RTK query, and that kind of thing, right? So in the first section here, Redux toolkits, how to work with related models and how to have actions to work through reducers. That's the whole point of the first exercise, the first section here with Redux toolkit, and then the Redux hooks, right? Redux. Okay, so this is how the exercise are organized. So Redux toolkit, right, as a way to see how this model relate to each other, how an action works through reducers, Redux toolkit, and then also we have is the type hooks. All right, as a way to how you can work with your hooks or your slides with TypeScript. And last but not least is the RTK query, right, which is with the asynchronous requests using this, right? RTK query, how to do data fetch and to update the state properly, which is not a trivial thing. And that's why we have a lot of libraries out there, like the React, like USWC, still while revalidate, you use WSR, as well as the React query, which do not provide a convenience nice way to actually fetch some data. Okay. So yeah, pretty much is this one. Pretty much is this one. Yep, pretty much is this one. Redux toolkit, type hooks, and that kind of thing. Okay, so let's actually hear about this. The introduction.
Hi, my name is Steve Kinney, and I am a lot of things are in Redux. Takes the current state of the world of Redux right out. We were talking about Redux, but we did a little chat a while back on Redux fundamentals where we talked about like the bare bones of Redux, right? And that we started out with like, could you write your own Redux? And like, I think the elegance of Redux, both the elegance and I think the tricky part of using it in production that a lot of people have found out over the years is hey, it's just a function that takes the current state of the world and action gives you a new one. Great, awesome. Right? It's got some nice little things like it supports middleware, and it's got this idea of the developer tools that are available to you and stuff along those lines. That's all great. However, setting up that middleware with developer tool involves something that you have to Google every single time. Then you go to I would love to have TypeScript support, and you're like, well, that's either it's very tedious and manual, like a lot of things are in Redux, or you have to write some arcane types. And then it's kind of that there's a lot of power to the idea that you can have. Its simplicity makes it so the fact that it's 100% unit testable. For even your promises happen outside of the actual Redux flow. So as long as you dispatch an action that says request whatever fulfilled, you can say this is how my state would update. And it's really powerful, but there became so much ceremony and so much tedious.
Exactly. Okay, because especially when you're fetching data, is that hey, this is how we keyword, how we're gonna update the data. Exactly. How we're gonna update our state.
And what actually is the best practice around setting up Redux that after one blows through kind of the introduction, you are left with a whole new set of questions with sometimes unclear answers, right? So our goal today is to do a series of meditations on what are the answers to those questions.
Exactly. Okay. I get it. Because at the end of the day, Reduxers, right, is the foundation of Redux. So the more inputs a particular state needs to react, the more it makes sense to actually use this Reducer. Okay, because now you can define all of these different type of actions, and when one of those type of action match, well, you can not only get some auto completion feature if you're using TypeScript, which is a great thing, but also you can now have is the this automatic, this predictable way of how your state is gonna be updated, right? And you're gonna have that in one particular file, which is great, cool, awesome, totally awesome. So the thing here is that I get it why he mentioned that it becomes tedious because it requires a lot of ceremony, okay? And the more ceremony required to actually do something, and that's also perhaps some of my problems that I have. For example, for when I gotta find jobs, this is another thing that I need to write this. Yeah, let me actually write that. I really hate the ceremonies, man, especially in the business. I get it. There is policies because you want to protect that, but I know that this is the way of how you're gonna this is not, if we want to speed up business, I recognize that first I need to be honest to myself, and second, this is the value that I'm going to provide to you. And I get it. Perhaps at the beginning I wasn't that great, all right, as a software engineer or as a UI specialist, but over the time what I'm doing is that because I recognize that you as I recognize it's all about recognizing the needs in the market. I recognize your needs, okay, and then pretty much I want you to now is provide you the most effective and efficient way possible. That's all, man. That's one of the reasons why I dedicate a lot of time to actually understand is all of this inner mechanism, how this thing works, especially how the JavaScript works, and underneath the hood, how we can use the ES6 and ES7, and what are the underlying technology that they're using, as well as the React, why we use React, what is the value proposition of React, and what is the main use case of React, and how that works behind the scenes? What is the mechanism that lead me is to understand then how can we now make these applications much more robust and easy to understand how the data is flowing through that by using TypeScript, and how can we now write performance applications that won't cause that the user ultimately leave your app because it's unresponsive. It's horrible to work. So we look at the React performance as well as the how can we now build as front-end applications, front-end design system, which is something that I'm actually looking at, as well as how can we now, as we build these applications, how can we do that in a scalable way for enterprise? Also another course that I'm looking at. And recently here with this advanced Redux as a way to now understand why we use this. And when it comes to, because a lot of companies actually are using this, and what are the main use cases that we want to use, as well as the problem that it solves. So that was huge, bro. And again, even though I'm still actually looking at how can we work with data structure and algorithm, and how you can apply most of this data structure, algorithm, and techniques to solve specific problems, which is very, very interesting. I must admit, and also very, very long, and I like it, and I like it that way. For now. So front-end system design. That's right. Yep. Front-end system design.
But there became so much ceremony and so much like tedium and like what actually is the best practice around setting up Redux that like after one blows through kind of the introduction, you are left with a whole new set of questions with sometimes unclear answers, right? So our goal today is to do a series of meditations on what are the answers to those questions that you commonly run into when you're like, and now I'm going to use this in production, right? And we'll kind of look at some of those things. Now, people, turns out, have used Redux in production before. So like, there are answers, and like most things, particularly with a tool that is both, simplicity and flexibility are usually bound together, and like this idea of simplicity, flexibility, and like you have to make a bunch of choices are usually kind of like part and parcel with each other. So, but over the last, however many years, there have been like a set of best practices that have kind of like formulated and emerged. Some of those we will talk about just in the way like we structure state and stuff like that as we go through our own implementation. Some of those we will kind of like learn by both using and then pulling apart Redux Toolkit, which is basically the Redux community over the last several years compiling and putting together a lot of the commonly used tools that get used, across like there was create Flux standard actions. Like, cool, can we bring those in as built-in action creators? Like, you probably use tools that get used, across like there was create Flux standard actions. Like, cool, can we bring those in as built-in action creators? Like, you probably in development almost always want to wire up the Redux dev tools. And like I joked earlier, the like way that you hook into those in the browser is unmemorizable and needs to be Googled for every single project. The setting up like the constants to hold actions, and then these various like things that we had to do that were not helping us build our feature, they're now kind of like somewhat formalized. And in a lot of ways, we have some tooling around it to make our lives easier. And so I think this workshop is really for two sets of people, right? I'm working on an app, I'm all like into Redux, but however, like whether it's not like spiritual, like I'm either forced or happy about it, but I am using Redux, or like I've heard about this Redux thing before. I tried out, like the amount of like things that I had to do was just too tedious. I would like to see what the current modern Redux stack is like. I think both of those are like the target thing that we are looking at here. Now, we will start a little bit with Redux Toolkit to just see what that means and what it looks like, and how the TypeScript support looks in its fullest and most glorious form. But then, the nice part about everything in Redux Toolkit, insofar that it is just an amalgamation of tooling and best practices, is you can take any given smaller piece of that and begin to like use parts of it in your existing application if you have one. Yes, Mark?
If you have some Redux experience, do you still recommend?
Really good point that I made, if I may. You can actually, if you use useReduce in a React app, still use a bunch of these tools. They still work, just a reducer and the idea that we dispatch actions, and that is not a completely foreign concept to you, then I think you are well suited to join us for the next little bit on this exploration. All right, so we have three major applications that we are working with today. We've got this idea of this app called Supertasker, and that is, it's a to-do list, but it has statuses and superhero names, so it's not like a to-do list. The interesting part about this application is that it's not just check a box. It is the idea of having two related models. That this idea that a user has many tasks and that a task belongs to a user, right? And so, like, how do you have an action that maybe like works through two reducers? One of the things, and we'll talk about this in the workshop, one of the things that I have seen a lot of teams, including my own teams, over the years do is like, oh, I have to fire like 6 different actions because I got to change the user, and I got to change the task, and I got to change these 3 other things, and like you don't, right? So we have a way that we can kind of see what that looks like and some of the concepts in Redux like that. Along the way, we will then also kind of just look at a stupid counter to see like what it looks like to just try in a very simple app to like see what it looks like to migrate stuff from maybe either use Reducer or regular vanilla Redux to something in Redux Toolkit and TypeScript and stuff along those lines. And then lastly, we will do a little bit of explorations with RTK Query, which is a set of features that come with Redux Toolkit, but you can use separately. You actually don't even need to use Redux to use it. A set of tools that deal with the fact that not these days it's not only just managing a bunch of standard applications, but usually there's a lot of talking back and forth with the server. So if you don't have these cloned, the first one is called Supertasker, because it's got superheroes. You should clone it and npm install it, give it a nice fresh pull down from main. We've got a little counter. We want the one with RTK at the end because it's really right now it's got nothing set up in it. It's just a tabula rasa, but that way we know it's set up with TypeScript. It's got all the right npm stuff installed. And then we have the one that we will use with RTK Query at the end of the day, which is kind of just another hacking list application that we can use that has a mock API built, so we can see all of the fun stuff, so mutations and queries and stuff along those lines. But
I just wanted to actually take notes out of this introduction. Why is it? Because this will lead me to understand and also to describe why do we do the thing that we do, one, and how you can apply that, because recently I have a meeting, right, 30 minutes, very, very, very precise, as a way to say, hey, I need you to solve this kind of problem, right? In that meeting, 30 minutes, the first 15 minutes was talk about is my experience and how I did the thing that I did, and what was my experience, my recent experience, and that kind of thing. That's one. And because of that, now, um, the last 50 minutes was to actually implement something very trivial, like implement a component that actually fetches some data from a server, and I want you to think in process. So, because of that, um, eh, the idea is that not only boost my confidence as I going to provide this service to the clients, okay, as a React developer right now, or as a senior software engineer, whatever name you want to, whatever label you want to put on that. But it's also used to understand that, hey, I don't know you, and I need this, and I need to check if that actually what you say is actually what you mean, right? So in those 30 minutes, I realized that the faster you can actually put your shit together, one, and second, to act upon that, which means that, hey, I got all of these problems, my soft skills actually sucks, my technical skill is not as strong as I think I am, and then I need to do something about it, okay? And as you do that, which is something that will take you, depend if you live on the US, it can take you like 6 months. In my case, it took me like a year, okay? Because I'm not exposed to that environment, so I need to actually is get myself familiar with the language and also the jargon, as well as the technical jargon. Not to mention is the business and the casual conversation, the business and casual way of talking or describe things. You know, is being also something that is more aligned to it is as a human, right? It's more like an introspective aspect in any case. But is that right? That thing exists. This is what it is. And ultimately, the whole point of that is to recognize. Again, I'm being quite redundant, and from that, I'm just going to take notes and actually going to do what I need to do in this course, in this video. Sorry, is that the more I realize that and this is quite, even saying this to me is like obnoxious, you know. You must recognize what is the value that you're providing, one, and second, what are the market needs, or what are the clients are looking for. Hey, I need you to know this pretty well, man, because with that we can now build something, and I can exchange you something along the way. It can be money, it can be ownership, but at least I need you to do that for me. So, yes. Yes. So that's one of the reasons why, I'm going to take note out of the Steve Kinney introductions before moving to more the practical aspect, which is something that I'm quite familiar, and after all the things that we're gonna do here is just to see, as he described and type Redux and build now and make use of Redux. Not only is take all of his experience and take notes of his experience, despite he talk a lot. You know, it's like, oh man, this man is it's like wax poetic things in their ivory tower. Yeah, but most of them make sense. So, well, in any case, yes. All right, good, awesome.
Hi, my name is Steve Kinney, and I am the head of front-end engineering at Temporal. We're going to talk about we were talking about Redux, but we did a little chat a while back on Redux fundamentals where we talked about like the bare bones of Redux, right? And that we started out with like, could you write your own Redux? And like, I think the elegance of Redux, both the elegance and I think the tricky part of using it in production that a lot of people have found out over the years is, hey, it's just a function that takes the current state of the world and action gives you a new one. Great, awesome. Right? It's got some nice little things like it supports middleware, and it's got this idea of the developer tools that are available to you and stuff along those lines. That's all great. However, like setting up that middleware with developer tool involves like something that you have to Google every single time. Then you go to like, I would love to have TypeScript support, and you're like, well, that's either it's very tedious and manual, like involves like something that you have to developer tools that are available to you and stuff along those lines. That's all great. However, like setting up that middleware with developer tool involves like something that you have to Google every single time.
Setting a middleware.
That's all great. However, like setting up that middleware with developer tool involves like something that you have to Google every single time. Then you go to like, I would love to have TypeScript support, and you're like, well, that's either it's very tedious and manual, like a lot of things are in Redux, or you have to write some like arcane types. And then like it's kind of that like there's a lot of power to the idea that you can have. Its simplicity makes it so the fact that it's like 100% unit testable for even your promises happen outside of the actual Redux flow. So as long as you dispatch an action that says like request whatever fulfilled,
yeah,
you
it's
can say like
actually
this is how my state would
testable.
update. And it's really powerful, but there became so much ceremony and so much batch and simplicity makes it so the fact that it's like 100% unit testable for even your promises happen outside of the actual Redux flow. So as long as you dispatch an action that says like request whatever fulfilled, you can say like this is how my state would update. And it's really powerful, but there became so much ceremony and so much like tedium and like what actually is the best practice around setting up Redux that like after one blows through kind of the introduction, you are left with a whole new set of questions with sometimes unclear answers, right? So our goal today is to do a series of meditations on what are the answers to those questions that you commonly run into when you're like, and now I'm going to use this in production, right? And we'll kind of look at some of those things. Now, people, turns out, have used Redux in production before. So like, there are answers, and like most things, particularly with a tool that is both, simplicity and flexibility are usually bound together, and like this idea of simplicity, flexibility, and like you have to make a bunch of choices are usually kind of like part and parcel with each other. So, but over the last, however many years, there have been like a set of best practices that have kind of like formulated and emerged. Some of those we will talk about just in the way like we structure state and stuff like that as we go through our own implementation. Some of those we will kind of like learn by both using and then pulling apart Redux Toolkit, which is basically the Redux community over the last several years compiling and putting together a lot of the commonly used tools that get used across like there was create Flux standard actions. Like, cool, can we bring those in as built-in action creators? Like, you probably, in development, almost always want to wire up the Redux dev tools. And like I joked earlier, the, like, way that you hook into those in the browser is unmemorizable and needs to be Googled for every single project. The setting up, like, the constants to hold actions, and then, these various, like, things that we had to do that, were not helping us build our features are now kind of like somewhat formalized. In a lot of ways, we have some tooling around it to make our lives easier. And so I think this workshop is really for two sets of people, right? I'm working on an app, I'm all like into Redux, but however, like whether it's not like spiritually, like I'm either forced or happy about it, but I am using Redux. Or like, I've heard about this Redux thing before. I tried out like the amount of like things that I had to do was just too tedious. I would like to see what the current modern Redux stack is like. I think both of those are like the target thing that we are looking at here. Now, we will start a little bit with Redux Toolkit to just see what that means and what it looks like and how the TypeScript support looks in its fullest and most glorious form. But then, the nice part about everything in Redux Toolkit, insofar that it is just a amalgamation of tooling and best practices, is you can take any given smaller piece of that and begin to like use parts of it in your existing application if you have one. Yes, Mark.
So, okay. In other courses, we have looked about how to create about the fundamentals of Redux, which is Reducers, right?
With like, we were talking about Redux, but you know, we did a little chat a while back on Redux fundamentals where we talked about like the bare bones of Redux, right? And that we started out with like, could you write your own Redux? And like, I think the elegance of Redux.
Exactly. Fundamental of Redux, which is could you write your own Redux? In other words, is a state management from the scratch, right?
Both the elegance and I think the tricky part of using it in production that a lot of people have found out over the years is, hey, it's just a function that takes the current state of the world and action gives you a new one. Great, awesome. Right? It's got some nice little things like it supports middleware, and it's got this idea of you know, the developer tools that are available to you and stuff along those lines.
Exactly. So, in this, in previous course, we look about the fundamental of Redux, which is could you write your own Redux, your state management? That makes sense, right? And one of the tricky parts and the elegant as well is that is a function that takes an state and an action to generate a new bit of state, right? Pretty much, essentially.
Right, it's got some nice little things like production that a lot of people have found out over the years is, hey, it's just a function that takes the current state of the world and action gives you a new one. Great, awesome. Right, it's got some nice little things like it supports middleware, and it's got...
Exactly. So you got now nice little things that support. Okay, you got now nice little things that support middleware, for example, middleware and dev tools. Okay.
This idea of you know, the developer tools that are available to you and stuff along those lines. That's all great. However, like setting up that middleware with developer tool involves like something that you have to Google every single time. Then you go to like
So that's great, but setting a middleware to work with your dev tools require to go and Google that every time you do that. Okay? And if you, for example, want to work with TypeScript, there is no support.
Don't have TypeScript support, and you're like, well, that's either it's very tedious and manual, like a lot of things are in Redux, or you have to write some like arcane types.
If you want to work with TypeScript, you'll have to write arcane types, since there is not too much support.
And then like it's kind of that like there's a lot of power to the idea that you can have. Its simplicity makes it so the fact that it's like 100% unit testable.
Okay, so if your example want to work with TypeScript, you will have to write arcane types, Exactly. Uh, and the simplicity makes it 100% testable, which is great. Okay.
For even even your promises happen outside.
Mm-hmm. Which is great. Even if a promise happen or an async operations happens outside of Redux flow,
Of the actual Redux
you
flow.
only
So as long as
care
you,
about is
dispatch.
so as long as you dispatch an action, the save request, whatever exactly. You only require is that. So if a promise happening outside of a Redux flow, as long as you dispatch an action, it'll.
An action that says like request whatever fulfilled. You can.
So as long as you dispatch an actions, you will update your state. You
can say like this is how my state would update, and it's really powerful. But there became so much.
Mm-hmm. So it's a promise happening outside of the Redux flow. As long as you dispatch an action, you will update your state, which is great, but it requires a lot of ceremony, which is something that I really hate about it, especially on business, especially if I know my worth and I know what I have to do.
Ceremony and so much like tedium and like what actually is the best practice around setting up Redux that like.
Exactly, which requires a lot of ceremony and is quite tedious. That's why we ask what is the best practice to use Redux, you know?
After one blows through kind of the introduction, you are left with a whole new set of questions with sometimes unclear answers, right?
So you now got some question. So you got now a new set of questions with some clear answers, with sometimes unclear answers. Unclear answers, right?
So our goal today is to do a series of meditations on what are the answers to those questions that you commonly run into when you're like, and now I'm going to use this in production.
Okay, so the goal of this course is to meditate about those questions that when you're running into it, when you're running into that
series of meditations.
Yeah, when you're running
what
into
are
that,
the answers to those questions
you
that you commonly run into when you're like, and now I.
Exactly, you're running into now I'm going to deploy this on production, right?
I'm going to use this in production, right? And we'll kind of look at some of those things. Now, people, turns out, have used Redux in production before. So, like, there are answers. And, like most things, particularly with a tool that is both, simplicity and flexibility are usually bound together. And, like, this idea of simplicity, flexibility, and, like, you have to make a bunch of choices are usually kind of, like, part and parcel with each other. So, But over the last, however many years, there have been like a set of best practices that have kind of like formulated and emerged. Some of those we'll.
So, over the past years, there has been some best practice that come out of this.
We'll talk about just in the way like we structure state and stuff like that as we go through our own implementation.
That come out like structure state implementation, something that I'm quite familiar with, right?
Some of those we will kind of like learn by both using and then pulling apart Redux Toolkit, which.
Okay. And the other is learn by doing.
Is basically the Redux community over the last several years compiling and putting together a lot of the commonly used tools that get used, across like there was create Flux standard actions. Like, cool, can we bring those in as built-in action creators? Like, you probably in development almost always want to wire up the Redux dev tools, and like I joked earlier, the like way that you hook into those in the browser is unmemorizable and needs to be Googled for every single project. The setting up like the constants to hold actions, and then these various like things that we had to do that were not helping us build our features are now kind of like somewhat formalized. In a lot of ways, we have some tooling around it to make our lives easier. And so I think this workshop is really for two sets of people, right? I'm working on an app, I'm all like into Redux, but however, like whether it's not like spiritually, like I'm either forced or happy about it, but I am using Redux. Or like, I've heard about this Redux thing before. I tried out, like the amount of like things that I had to do was just too tedious. I would like to see what the current modern Redux stack is like. I think both of those are like the target thing that we are looking at here. Now, we will start a little bit with Redux Toolkit to just see what that means and what it looks like, and how the TypeScript support looks in its fullest and most glorious form. But then, the nice part about everything in Redux Toolkit, insofar that it is just a amalgamation of tooling and best practices, is you can take any given smaller piece of that and begin to like use parts of it in your existing application if you have one. Yes, Mark?
If you have some Redux experience, do you
So,
We are.
okay. It's like, okay. It's like cool. Yeah, that I need to actually write it down because it will now stick way much more about hey, do you know how to write your own Redux, which is a state management? Yes, pretty much. If you're familiar with use Reducer, you are quite essentially are creating your own state management in a more predictable and maintainable way. So not only that, is to also recognize that despite that Redux make it things more simple and elegant to manage the state of our application, okay, a lot of the time when you're setting a middleware, okay, because we got now a lot of things out of the box like support middlewares and DevTool, but sometimes when you need to actually create your middlewares and connect that to a DevTool, that was actually quite pain. So you have to actually Google that every single time you actually do that. That's one. There is a pain point there. The other is that when you want to have TypeScript support, it's actually a lot of the time you have to use some of these arcane types as a way to fit that. And not only that, when you which make this state management 100% testable, because after all, this is just a single function that takes an states and an action to generate a new bit of states, which is great. It make it 100% testable, and so this is great. For example, when you need to check promise that happening outside of the Redux flux, as a way to say, all right, now the things that happen outside of this, it doesn't impact that, as long as you dispatch is an actions, which yeah, as long as you dispatch an action that it will update is that it will update your state, which is great, but it requires a lot of ceremony to actually do that, and it's quite tedious. So one of the pain points that Redux and the community actually come up here is to answer questions like, what are the best practices of using this state management? Makes sense. For example, when you want to add a new middleware and connect that to the dev tool, or when you want to write tests and make it less verbose. Okay, so after all, what you want to do is that dispatch an actions, and that action will now update the state. How can you write less code to actually do that? And also and what are the questions of other, and what are the answer of other questions that we may have along the way while we're using this, that sometimes it is unclear, we get unclear answers, right? But despite that, the Redux community actually come up with some of the best practice over the years. Thanks. In the goal of this course is to see how you can meditate about those questions when you run into, hey, now I need to deploy this on production. Okay, and that is, well, the state management, structure the state implementation, as well as learn by doing the Redux community, and that makes a lot of sense. But I think there is couple pain points here that Redux Toolkit actually provide you out of the box as a way to help you to solve some of these common problems. One of them is TypeScript support. The other is that how you can actually despite that your Reduxers are 100% testable because it's a function, how you can update your state without requiring too much ceremony. Update your state without requiring too much ceremony. How you can define middlewares and then connect that with your dev tools. As well as provide TypeScript support. But I think is this three main aspect here. Is the three main aspects. How can we now work? How can we make our Redux how can we make our Redux to update that state without requiring too much ceremony? One. And the other is, how can we now is, as we define a middleware, which is a fancy to say, hey, this is now a function that will act between 2 points. So it's a function that is be run once it pass through the Redux flow. Okay, which is a function that's gonna sit here and then run something. Okay, and then you want is now to connect that to your dev tool as a way to see that actually works as expected. Makes a lot of sense. And last but not least is that, well, now how can we provide TypeScript support? So this is the three main problems here. It's like how we can make our state updates require less ceremony because can become tedious, how can we now add middlewares and connect that to our dev tool without having to Google every time we do that? And how we can provide TypeScript to this state management? My God. Oh, that's okay. Okay, I think that, so. This is the pain points. So pain points, right? So pain points in this introduction. Okay. So the goal of this is to answer, or is to meditate, is to sorry, my bad. So the goal of this course is to meditate about what are the best practices when it comes to update our state without too much ceremony, adding a middleware and connect it to our dev tools without connected to our dev tool without Google it every time we make a new one, and provide TypeScript support. You know, is this one. Alright, that makes a lot of sense. Completely. Absolutely. Absolutely. Alright. Okay. That was quite compelling, quite interesting. Yeah, I must admit that. Yep. Alright. Those things started to sink in. Alright. The third things starting to sink in. Gradually started believe, understanding, or realize the effect you will have on sink in. Okay, and I really love about that, this particular word. So things started to sink in. Yeah, things started to sink in. So you started to understand, to dive deep into this. But sink in, or this has come from Soma, a very, 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 very interesting game. Jesus. Very interesting game. Oh my God. Yeah, it is. Oh, nigga. And I get it. What is this advantage all about? This is another reason why I'm actually taking notes out of this particular course, and also put up practice this English skill, or to verbalize this, because what I'm doing is just expose myself to that, and when someone in that particular field actually need to, or ask me, hey, or ask me a question, I need to give them a particular answer, and a precise answer, and stop to say, hey, or to doing this mumbo jumbo. It's like, no. All right. Okay. Let's get into this, my friend.
Are going to look at like this idea of a slice.
Okay, so Redux toolkit here. Redux toolkits. So we're gonna here now to create slides. So create slice. Right? Create slice. There you got it.
And this is the only, like, the reason I bring it up in the beginning, this is the only kind of like brand new concept that we're talking about. Like everything else is like, I guess the RTK query stuff at the end is also a brand new concept. This is like the true like brand new concept, which is an amalgamation of other concepts that I like this abstraction because I have previously tried to build my own form of this abstraction that I have not liked nearly as much. But it starts to show like some of the nice things that we get, some of the thought process around how you can create stuff with like patterns in Redux that don't necessarily always involve setting up like 5 different files to do the simplest thing every single time, right? And I think that is where Redux got some of a bad rap. And so these are patterns that you could use today in your regular Redux app or in a Redux Toolkit app. You can pick, this is like a buffet. It's not like I have to go all in. Like you can pick whatever you want from this buffet and it will work at whatever level of granularity makes sense to you, right? And that's why we're kind of looking in this sense because it's all pick and choose. You do not have to go all in at any
Pick
point.
and choosing your buffet.
Well, let's look at what a slice is, and let's look at some of the practices around that, because it's going to give me an excuse to talk about like mistakes that I have made in the past and how you cannot be like me. Or you can be like current me and not like past me. Nobody wants to be like past me. Awesome. So we normally need something like, we don't want to write this in git keep. That's not a place to write things. That's just a place to make sure you have the folder already. We'll make a new file called tasks plural slice, which I'm just going to love saying repeatedly all day today. I could have picked any other euphemism to do, something like that, but here we are already, and we're going to make it happen. And we need some data structure to hold on to our tasks. And this is one of the first places where I tend to get bitten. And this is just a how do we structure our state question more than it is a how do I even Redux question. Briefly, we will look at just the shape of a task. A task is basically has ID, it has a title. If we choose to go full comp on board with this, that will become important. But otherwise, it belongs to a user. A user has many tasks. So a basic relationship model that is a little bit more than what we see in the kind of basics, but definitely something we often have to deal with in our real code bases. So it is very tempting when coming up with the shape of the initial state to be like, yo, it's an array of tasks. I got this, right? And be something like constant initial state is an array. Now, there's a number of problems with this. Some of these will be easily solved. All of them are easily solvable, which is like Redux or TypeScript out of the box does not know what an empty array is in any way, shape, or form, right? It's like this could be anything, and worse, if we solve our second problem, we make the first problem worse. So like, right now it thinks it's absolutely anything. If we put it in an object, it'll think it's absolutely nothing. So let me show you what I mean by that. So we said something like entities, and that'll be an array. Then it becomes an array of never, because it's like, hey, this was initially set as an array of nothing, which means this object must just hold on to an array of nothing forever and ever and ever, right? And like, that's not particularly great. And it gets a little harder to like dynamically type it here, so like it makes sense if we're gonna use TypeScript to, and this is probably a good thing to do in general, what is the shape of our state? And like, we want something we can add to over time. So I always have this inclination of like, well, I should just start with an array. And that's problematic for a number of reasons. If I need to hold on to anything else, like, is this list currently loading? Is it like pulling from the server at this moment? Do I want to keep the actual fundamental object separate from the ID so I can iterate over an array of strings to like populate things versus have an indexable object to get the different objects? Like, starting out with just the kind of like, I only need this, a lot of times gets you to a place where as soon as you need the second thing, you have to rework almost all of your like kind of, for this at least part of your application, and if you make it repeatedly, more than one place, part of your application, you have to rework this over and over and over again. So one of the things that I would implore you to do, especially like in a larger and real code base, is to kind of start out with an object that you can add keys to. And there's a bunch of ways you could do this, but we'll say like our type of our task state will have this idea of entities, which will be an array of, in my case, those tasks, right? And the nice part about doing it in a type is that I can like say what the array is. So now when I just use the array in the initial state, and if I say that the whole object is of this type, TypeScript will figure all the rest of it out. And again, this means that later I can add additional keys. The other reason for this is The other thing that is a lot of times really tricky about state management in Redux is if you have deeply nested objects that immutability involves a lot of spread operators.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the tooling that comes with Redux Toolkit has this library called immer, right? And immer lets you just pretend that your state is mutable. Push things onto arrays, pop them off, right? Just flip Boolean values, reassign strings, it's cool. The only thing that you cannot do, really, is flat out replace that object you were given at the very beginning, right? Because it's going to use is try to look at the changes to that object, and it just won't work. So if you only give yourself an array, and you ever come to the situation of I had this array, I've made a new network request of blog posts, tweets, items, I want to just swap it out. If the array is your base level object, you can't. And by the time you're at that level of working on whatever feature, you are already several hours or several days in, right? And so I know that it seems a little much now, but future you will thank you. Could you call it tasks? You absolutely could. When you use combine reducer, it's going to be tasks.tasks, so whatever. The important part is, I'm not here to argue about naming things. The important part is that you have something called out, right? And you can switch what that data structure looks like and how it's shaped later, but having some way that you have an object that you can add and remove keys to store additional information, because otherwise you'll end up finding yourself making other reducers and other slices and stuff along those lines, and that there's no reason to start out in that general direction. So starting out with a shape for your state that makes sense will serve you in the future. But now we have that. And so now we can say that our initial state, which is a form of task state, plural, even though that means I have to say it more, it's still the right choice. And that can start out as simply, now if you look at the type of this one, other than the fact that it's not used, right, you can see that it has the right type, so now we can push tasks on that and nothing else, so we'll get all the type safety. Type safety is totally worth it as long as you don't accidentally opt yourself out of it. And I will probably need this shape for unit tests later, so I'll export it now. So we've got that, that shape there. Now what we want to do is just create a slice. So we can kind of see the pieces in here. So with that, we can say create slice and pull that off of Redux Toolkit. Redux Toolkit, if you have Redux Toolkit, you have Redux. You can also do this, this is a thing in Redux Toolkit, but you can use them, you can migrate them together. It works out really great. So we'll say that this is a tasks slice. And this takes an object. And what this will do is we give it a name. And this is just what it prefixes all the actions with, so that when you see in the dev tooling, because you're I'm gonna call this action add. And then later, 2 weeks from now, you're what is it even adding? I don't even know. So this gives you the ability to namespace that right now. We pass in the initial state. And then finally, it needs some level of reducers. And reducers look a little bit different, but I don't think I can repeat this enough in the very beginning. This will just basically spit out stuff you can normally use in a regular Redux setup. None of this, I'll say it one more time, this is all like a buffet. Take the parts that interest you, take the parts that you can use today or tomorrow, keep your existing infrastructure. You do not have to rewrite anything, right? But you will get some niceties and some conveniences. If you're hey, new features moving forward, awesome, right? Existing stuff we keep, especially if it's working. Sometimes rewriting stuff that works is fraught with peril. So we'll keep that in place here. And then we create some actions, but we don't have to make 17 other files. Everything will live. Everything about this concept of a task, I'll even lowercase the L like a normal person. And we'll have, everything can live inside this file and have one encapsulated place. But it's all the same stuff that we'll get under the hood no matter what, just again, with better TypeScript support.
So we don't have to have,
so
we don't need to have all of this file, all of this reduction in a separate file. So we have all of them inside of this
mini reducers
as a wrapper.
Right, well, they'll take the state. You can guess that the second argument is an action. But instead of writing a series of conditionals, or I still don't know the syntax for a switch statement, and I at this point don't care to learn it. But instead of worrying about these things and all those pieces, you can basically say have a bunch of methods for the tasks that you expect to have. And what's really cool about this is that not only is this setting up your reducer, but it is also creating the actions that you can hand to dispatch, as well as the action creators, and wiring up all of the types in the methods for the tasks that you expect to have. And what's really cool about this is that not only is this setting up your reducer, but it is also creating the actions that you can hand to dispatch, as well as the action creators, and wiring up all of the types in TypeScript for you. So you will get it all for free. Now, if you're like, you turn out you don't like this abstraction, like you can actually take the two pieces of create reducer and create actions. I use create action even when I'm not using Redux. And it will still wire up a lot of this for you. Well, let's look at it all together first. So we have this in place, and let's just grab one of these for a second. So, and just kind of look at like what we get at the end of the day here. So we'll say task slice, and it's got a bunch of things, plural.
Task.
And we'll say actions. And you can see that for every property that I put on the reducer, you can see add and remove task. Well, you see add and remove task here. For every action that I put on the reducer, it automatically creates an action to reducer for me. And I can just have these, and like these are things I can pass into the reducer now, and it will all just work.
Is that with or without TypeScript?
Like normally if you're using like VS Code, if you're writing JavaScript, and under the hood it's got types, VS Code will like be like, yo, here are the options for you, right? Like, it's not gonna yell at you when you mess it up, but the hints will be there for you. Yeah, it's one of those things, even if you're not a TypeScript shop at all, having stuff with great TypeScript support, like, still benefits you in your day-to-day, right? And like, also like VS Code, if you have like really great JS doc, like notation written above your functions, you'll also get that. However, I think that especially for non-libraries, like in internal code, most people do not do meticulous JS docs for their internal code. So you tend not to have it as much. So having some of the stuff kind of like ready to go is incredibly important. And like out of the box, you saw that I had the autocomplete there. It is automatically going to create a task with the action type tasks/add task, right? So you automatically get those like 3 or 4 different files that you would have made previously are already wired up for you and ready to go. And that's, again, an incredibly kind of powerful piece in here. So that's great for something that does not kind of take any arguments, and sometimes that's true, right? They hit the logout button. A lot of times there's not extra information that you need to give. It's like, user is logging out.
It's because it's so Redux is actually now creating a lot of this boilerplate out of the box for us, especially as a way to now give us is TypeScript support. That's one of it. And now the ability to, instead of actually creating files for reducers, as well as all of the actions inside of that and all of the if or switch statements, and put now some types to that, it actually generates that automatically for us. That's interesting. That's very, very interesting. And I think that'll be all for this video. Take care. Bye-bye.